My grandfather, Raymond vonRue, was a very tall, very imposing man, and he knew it. For most of my childhood, I don't remember him using a normal speaking voice, always shouting to communicate. He had white hair and very fair skin like I do, and when he would begin shouting, his face turned a very bright shade of red. He got very worked up, gesticulating wildly, often spitting as he was shouting. My childhood was not stable, and I often found myself at my grandparents' house while my mother was working when she had a job. Back in that day, abuse was not really recognized or thought of as abuse. Rather, it was just how you raised children. I don't have many memories of my childhood, which is actually comforting for me, except in those moments when you are asked something about your childhood and you have to tell your friends that you don't have memories like that. There are some memories that are very clear to me. The way my grandfather used to make me kneel outside on the stucco sidewalk with my arms outstretched to the sides for what seemed like ages when I had done something wrong. The belt or paddle he often used for discipline, the constant screaming every day, which is one reason I believe that I have hearing loss today, the constant belittling of me and my mother. Today, I am able to say that my grandfather emotionally and physically abused me every single day of my life until his death. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, "Time heals all wounds," but I don't believe that to be true. I was meeting with my spiritual advisor last month, and we were talking about the unique stress of being a minister, and somehow the topic of my grandfather arose. She asked me if my grandfather was still alive, and I said, "No, but he shows up everywhere I go." Ministers are trained to recognize which of our own buttons are being pushed so that we can self-differentiate our emotions from the pastoral needs of the person we are with. Sometimes as a hospital chaplain, I would come away from a visit with some very strong emotions, and after sitting with those, I was able to figure out what in my own story this particular pastoral visit had pushed up against. For instance, when I was an intern in Binghamton, New York, there was a congregant in that church who seemed to be my grandfather reincarnated. He was a very tall, white-haired man who knew his privilege and power. My very first Sunday as the intern in Binghamton, I preached a sermon about a hymn. The words are, "From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live." And I preached about the idea that we need one another to make it through this world. A week after my sermon, I found a very strongly worded letter in my mailbox at the church, railing against my sermon, calling me the anti-minister for telling people that they needed one another, and many other nasty things which I'm glad I have forgotten, though I'm sure I could find the letter somewhere if I looked. He spent the entire 2 years of my internship sitting at the front of the sanctuary with a frown on his face and his arms folded across his chest, never rising to sing or participate in worship at all. He would then come through the receiving line. He would fluff himself up to the largest stature, lean over me, put his finger in my face, and tell me everything I had done wrong that day. Our relationship had culminated on one Sunday toward the end of our time together when he came through the receiving line to say, "I know this congregation is voting whether to ordain you or not next Sunday, and while we cannot come to the service, we wanted to let you know that we would vote no." He acted just like my grandfather had, and I knew that. I identified that right away after his actions in the receiving line on that first Sunday. But that did not stop me from being hurt by all of it. You see, my grandfather had been dead for 20-some years at that point, and the grief, the wounds I had from him were still very much open and painful, Clearly, time had not healed those wounds. The December Touchstones journals also explored this idea of time healing wounds and says some of what is said or written about healing is superficial, like time heals. George Orwell wrote, "They say that time heals all things. They say you can always forget. But the smiles and tears across the years, they twist my heartstrings yet." A sentiment like time heals creates a chasm between the person who says it and the wounded person who hears it. Obviously, it is an attempt at kindness, but it ignores the pain of the present moment, ignores the horizon that is impossible to see, ignores the fact that time by itself is not a physician. The meaning of the word healing goes back to the 13th century Old English sense of restoration or wholeness. By contrast, the meaning of the word cure goes back to about the same time, but to restore health or a sound state. From Old French cure, and directly from Latin curare, take care of. Over time, cure has come to mean eliminating all evidence of disease. The Reverend Fred Lacow in Partners in Care, Medicine and Ministry Together offers a thoughtful, extended comparison of cure versus healing. He writes, "Cure alters what is, healing offers what might be. Cure is an act, healing is a process. Cure acts upon another, healing shares with another. Cure manages, healing touches. Cure seeks ultimately to conquer pain, healing seeks to transcend pain. Cure ignores grief, healing assumes grief. Cure encounters mystery as a challenge for understanding. Healing encounters mystery as a ready channel for meaning. Cure rejects death and views it as a defeat. Healing includes death among the blessed outcome of caring. Cure may occur without healing. Healing may occur without cure. Cure separates body from soul. Healing embraces the soul. Cure tends to isolate. Healing tends to incorporate. Cure combats illness. Healing fosters wellness. Cure fosters function. Healing fosters purpose. Cure has to do with the body, while healing has to do with the emotions and the soul. And when a cure is not possible in cases involving a disability, a chronic illness, or a terminal illness, we are wise to pursue healing. Our reading today by the Reverend Victoria Safford reminds us that part of healing ourselves means that we must mend broken relationships, and that the healing is about being truthful with yourself and the person you have hurt. She writes, "Imagine something yearns in us to come round right. Something creaky, rusty, heavy, almost calcified within us tries, in spite of us and all our fears and self-deceptions, to turn and creak and turn again and come around right, and come around a little truer, healing, holy from within. In order for us to be able to heal any brokenness, we must acknowledge it and be truthful about it. It does not make us any less human. In fact, it only makes us more human. Being truthful about our lives, our relationships, our wounds, it weaves us into the great tapestry of our very humanity. And through all of this, despite our wounds, our misgivings, our failures, and our active healing, we are still wholly whole humans. Our reading today by the Reverend Beth Lefevre reminds us that even in the broken places, the places where fear impedes our full engagement with life, where self-doubt corrupts our self-love, where shame makes our faces hot and our souls cold, we are whole. We are whole, even in our fragility, Even where we feel fragmented, alone, insubstantial, insufficient, we are whole. Even as we are in process, even as we stumble, even as we pick ourselves up again, we are whole. And back to my main point. As Worth Kilcrease writes, time doesn't heal. It's what you do with the time that does. Since healing should not be a solitary endeavor, especially in our congregations, it is what we do with that time that heals. Grief and healing are always going to be hard and complicated. Friends, it does not get easier. We get stronger. It is in that time of our complicated healing process that our body and spirit become stronger because we face the reality, the truth, every single day. Every day we wake up and start anew because we have learned to live through the grief and pain and to feel it and embrace what it has to teach us. And that, my loves, is what makes us stronger. The proverbial ghost of my grandfather remains in my life. He has shown up in every congregation I have served, and he shows up in every place that is important to me. He is still here trying to tell me I will never be good enough. The truth of this is that there is a piece of me that thinks he is right, that I can never be good enough. And over these 25 years, I have gotten stronger. No longer do those thoughts shut me down or erase me. Those thoughts remind me of my grandfather. They push me to become even greater, kinder, more compassionate human than I was yesterday. In an episode of one of my favorite shows, Call the Midwife, during a particularly hard time for one of the young midwives, she's speaking to a community elder, sharing her grief through her tears. And when she was finished speaking, the respected elder turns to her and says, "You will feel better than this. Maybe not yet, but you will. Just keep living until you feel alive again." So, my loves, when we become wounded, let us take time to grieve, and then in that journey of healing where we may feel weak, let us allow ourselves to grow, to strengthen in resolve and resilience. Let us trust in the power of healing, and when the path seems like it is just too hard to continue, may we just keep living until we feel alive again. Blessed be. Shalom and amen.